Hi, I'm Sarah from talkly.co.uk and I'm here with another lesson on Death and the King's Horseman, looking specifically at the very start of Act 1. Big shout out as we do this lesson to my Macau group class. Don't forget that if you would like to study with me, there are many ways to do that on my website. I do one-to-one tutoring, group classes, revision masterclasses, courses that you can do in your own time, and teaching resources if you are a teacher. So if you want to find out more about that, look at the links in the video description or go over to talkly.co.uk. Now I have got a much longer video lesson on Death and the King's Horseman where I go over everything that you need to know on the play. Basically it's an hour long, but let me just quickly tell you the things that you do need to know for this extract. So in this extract, it's really important for you to spot the Yoruba beliefs. So the Yoruba people believe in 3 stages of being. That is the unborn, the living, and the ancestors. So they believe that these 3 stages of being are actually all connected and that you can move between those stages. And Ellison is the passageway between those 3 stages of being. So therefore, when Ellison fails to commit his duty of doing the ritual suicide, he is destroying the 3 stages of being, not just his living world, but also the afterlife and the life of the unborn. So really a truly destructive choice. Thanks for that, Ellison. Now, as representing Ellison as the passageway between these 3 stages of being, do notice that the very, very start of the play, in the stage directions, it refers to a passage through the market, which would be Ellison, a metaphor for his duty that he has to fulfill. So just watch out for those kinds of things as you go through the play. Characters now. And a quick overview of what you need to know about the 2 characters that we'll see in the start of Act 1. So we've got Ellison Oba. Again, I go over this in way more detail in my long video, so I don't want to spend too long here. But notice Ellison Oba, he's our tragic hero. So he undergoes a tragic fall from a high status to a low status due to his fatal flaw, that loss of will. So in our opening extract, do look out for all of those clues and foreshadowing of what will happen in terms of how much he enjoys the worldly pleasures of food and women and the marketplace and praise and honour and everyone flattering him. Do also notice his beauty with words, his metaphorical language, and how gregarious, larger than life and colourful a character he is, in contrast to how he ends the play when he is disgraced. All of this is that wider warning by Soyinka that being too attached to material and earthly pleasures can corrupt your individual will, because you are too focused on the individual and not on society as a whole. And the rest of the points are not quite as important for this extract, but you're free to read them. And then we've also got the praise singer, who, remember, is a member of the Horseman's entourage, and it will be his job to take Ellison into the state of mind where he can commit that ritual suicide and then to sing his praises after his death. One thing to note about the stage teller here is that he's got this really joking, close relationship with Ellison. He holds him in high respect, which contrasts to his sense of betrayal and disappointment at the end of the play when Ellison fails to fulfill his duty. And in the same extract, you will also see the praise singer, like Iologia, warning Ellison of being too attached to earthly pleasures, especially of women. Okay, all of that important context to do. Let's get to analysing the extract. Book upside down. So this comes from a past paper question from Cambridge. The question was, how does Soyinka make the opening to the play so fascinating? And it is from the very, very start of the play, basically the first 2 lines. So from the start of the play up until the 2nd page where Ellison says, the gods have said no. Now, even if you're not doing Cambridge, if you're doing Edexcel, you're going to have to analyse Act 1. So yes, we're analysing an extract, but this lesson is relevant and appropriate for anyone studying this play at IGCSE level. Firstly, one of the ways that the opening of this play is so fascinating is by the use of the setting of the marketplace. So the metaphor in the play is this wider metaphor for being the centre of the world, a place where everything happens, and could even also be seen as this microcosm, a representation of a wider society as a whole, so maybe representative of Nigerian society as a whole. It also allows us to become immersed in Yoruba culture, because we're immediately thrown into all of the sensory sight, sound, smells of the marketplace, and just this kind of sense of chaos and vitality. But do notice that we see that the opening lines say that the market is in its closing stages. So is this a metaphor for Ellison, who is also now in the closing stages of his life, or should be? And the women too, they pass through on their way home. So again, this sense of leaving, of things coming to an end, is very much present from those very, very opening lines. As we said before, notice these references to the passage in both sections of the opening stage directions of the play. We hear that we are in a passage through a marketplace, so through life itself, and Ellison is entering a longer passage. Well, Ellison should be keeping the passageway open between the three states of being, the unborn, the living and the ancestors, by committing that ritual suicide, but his failure to do that, he is risking all three stages of existence and the natural order of the world itself. So this here is symbolic of Ellison's duty that he should fulfill, and perhaps foreshadowing the fact that he won't actually fulfill it. In the opening of the play, we see this use of music as well as a feature of form, and we see musicality the whole way through the play. Yoruba people love to sing and dance and play drums, and the drums are often seen as being the beat of life, like a heartbeat. In fact, the whole way through the play we've got music in almost the whole background, including Act 5 when there's a dirge literally the whole way through the song. So this is that honouring of Yoruba culture, and also referencing the African literary tradition, where traditionally African theatre was told through the oral tradition and not written down as scripts so much in the same way that you might have something like a Shakespeare play. So by doing this and having all of this music, Soyinka is honouring traditional forms of theatre that were lost by colonialism. As we've also said though, this opening very much foreshadows Ellison's tragic fall. So we see his love of the market, which also symbolises his love of life. This will foreshadow the conflict he will experience between his desires and his duties, his individual pleasure versus his community needs, the fact that he should sacrifice for the greater good of his community, but he is too busy with his own personal desires of the flesh, of women, of praise, of life itself. So you can see that where he's pursued by his drummers and praise singers, people following him along, complimenting him. Who would want to leave that life? It's a good life. Soyinka describes Ellison as a man of enormous vitality and an infectious enjoyment of life. So this is all very much foreshadowing his fatal flaw, his hamartia, which will be his failure of his own will to commit to the duty that he is supposed to perform for his community. And as a result, this opening will very much contrast with the end of the play, where at the end he is pathetic, pitiable and disgraced. We see the use of Yoruba language too in this extract. For example, Olohun Iyo, which means praise singer, Oba, which means chief, Hau, which means how or why, Isu, which is the Yoruba gid of mischief and uncertainty, and Alari, meaning rich woven cloth that is brightly coloured. So, this language might be unusual or unfamiliar to a Western or non-African audience. So for remembering that Soyinka, he's writing in English, so he very much intended for this play to be performed outside of the Yoruba land, and he worked too in the theatre in London. So he was writing for multiple audiences here. So for that non-African audience, it might be locating us in this setting that is rich and vibrant, and perhaps not like our stereotypical image of Nigeria or of the Yoruba people, if we even had an image before watching this play. He's also blending English with the Yoruba language, blending Western forms of theatre with African traditions and language. Now, one of the things that Soyinka has been criticised for was, well, if you want to write a play that is resisting colonialism, the only reason why people speak English in Nigeria is because of colonisation. So why not write this play entirely in Yoruba? Why use the white man's language? Soyinka might argue, if you want to get a message spread, you have to put it in a language that most people can understand. Indeed, in Africa, there isn't the only one united language would be English, because you've got many different languages spoken in Africa, Igbo being the other bigger one besides Yoruba. So English is, unfortunately, as a byproduct of colonialism, a common language. But do note that and we'll get into this deeper a little bit later, but the Yoruba language and the Yoruba people, when they're speaking English, are speaking it so beautifully and metaphorically, contrasting with the British colonials who seemed completely out of touch with their own culture and their language. So this use of the Yoruba language could be portraying that beauty and showing how much the Yoruba value not only their language but their culture and their history, as well as I think Soyinka trying to revive the African language and keep alive something that was almost lost as a result of this colonialism, coming in, stripping the people of their religion, their language, their culture, their theatre, and now Soyinka very much bringing this play to our theatres and showing it's still alive and it's here and it's beautiful and it's colourful. Now I'm going to get a bit crude here and there's no way to get around it, unfortunately. Like some of the books that Cambridge have picked have got some sexual imagery in, so if you don't want to hear about that, just skip over onto the next slide. So Ellison is described as being a cockerel. So cockerel imagery, well, that relates to the wider use of nature imagery, like showing that the Yoruba people are in touch with nature and the natural order, and therefore when Ellison fails to commit ritual suicide, he disrupts that natural order. But also consider that when he says, when the praise singer says rather, "What tryst is this the cockerel goes to keep with such haste that he must leave his tail behind?" Tryst meaning a meeting between secret lovers, therefore sexual connotations. And cockerel meaning a rooster, a male chicken. So cockerel, a man, yes, sure. And it can be comedic in some contexts because cockerels are known to be able to impregnate quite a lot of chickens quite quickly, having lots of stamina, being quite prideful and loud and attention-seeking. But in many different cultures, we have like names of male genitalia, like slang, coming from cockerel. Think about English, shorten that word, what do you get? I know in Chinese, chicken has got a certain meaning that's very similar. I bet it's the same in lots of other languages. Please don't give me all of your dirty words in the comments. But essentially, yes, it's got these like sexual connotations to it too, which matches Ellison. It shows that he is hedonistic, which means seeking pleasures of the flesh, of the earthly world. He's driven by this kind of like sexual desire and love of life. Not sexual desire by itself, but love of life, of which sexual desire is a component. And this will also therefore foreshadow Ellison's future. The market is my roost. Well, the market meaning as a symbol of life itself. Actually, Ellison, you're about to die. Your roost should be the afterlife. Your roost should be the duty. So these language choices are still putting us very much like in the earthly realm, whereas Ellison should now be looking to the future of what he's got to do that very night. One other way that Soyinka makes this a really, really interesting opening is that we have this kind of like gradual reveal of the fact that Ellison will commit suicide. It's not clear to us. And especially if you're not familiar with the backstory or the play or Yoruba tradition or rituals, it can be very surprising. When I first read this play, I read it blind. And after I got to the end of Act 1, I was really confused. To be honest, I didn't get the idea that Ellison was going to kill himself. I knew something was going to happen and perhaps something to do with death. And I knew he was going to marry a new bride, but I was confused. And I had to search online. I had to pause and go, right, what's happening here? And when I found out like he's committing ritual suicide because the king's died, I was shocked. It wasn't obvious to me. So yeah, you've got this gradual reveal which is so gradual or so metaphorical that even someone with an English degree might not grasp it initially. So some of the clues that we do get that Ellison is going to kill himself are when the praise singer says, "Are you sure there will be one like me on the other side?" Okay, on the other side is a metaphor for the afterlife. And Ellison says, "You're like a jealous wife. Stay close to me, but only on this side, the living realm. My fame, my honour and legacies to live in. Stay behind, let the world sip its honey from your lips." So here we have got this clue like, oh, on the other side, will you meet someone like me? Stay close to me, but only while I'm alive, and after I've died, you're going to sing about my honour and my legacies to keep my reputation alive. So we've got this gradual reveal where we're figuring out, okay, what's happening? He's got to kill himself, but why? Or even I got the sense he's going to die. I didn't know that he knew that. I didn't know that he was going to commit suicide specifically. I was like, how does he know he's going to die? Anyway, maybe I just wasn't paying proper attention that day. It was a long day. So all of this is this kind of dramatic device, this building of tension, this gradual reveal of facts. It's also important to notice at this very opening of the play, like our first impressions of Ellison. You know, how would you describe him? He could be described as materialistic, sexually driven or a womanizer, a pleasure seeker or a hedonist, full of the joy of life and full of jokes, just an ordinary man, or the man, right? Because everyone seems to worship and flatter him, almost like he's the king himself. And all of this leads to this impression of actually Ellison is someone who is quite overconfident. And this overconfidence is something that leads to his downfall, because he just assumes that this ritual suicide will be easy for him. He doesn't stop and think about, oh, might not be so easy to actually kill yourself. Like, how am I going to make sure that I do it? What's my system going to be? I don't know. He just assumes, like, yeah, I'm Ellison. I'm the man. Like, it's fine. Don't worry, guys. One more night of passion, no problem. And then I'll kill myself, right? But not actually in reality. I've just realised I'm going to put this in YouTube, right? And aren't there, like, censors for saying the word suicide? Don't they say, like, unalive yourself on TikTok or something? But YouTube, this is an IGCSE video lesson, come on. Hopefully not going to get demonetized here. And also another key point about the first impressions of Ellison would be his fatal flaw, this lack of will or his failure of will. And do note that all of this is very much present from the very, very beginning of the play. So we can see that he's already not really fully committed to what is going to happen. He's quite distracted by the market and by the women. So this could all be used as evidence that actually it's not the colonialists that cause him to fail his ritual suicide, but himself and his own, like, deep flaws. Some more evidence that could back up that point. We've got Ellison's love of material pleasures. The praise singer himself warns to Ellison. He says, "They love to spoil you, but beware. The hands of women also weaken the unwary." Well, Ellison very much is the unwary who is definitely weakened. Ellison's response: "This night I'll lie my head upon their lap and go to sleep. This night I'll touch feet with their feet in a dance that is no longer of this earth. But the smell of their flesh, their sweat, the smell of the indigo on their clothes, this is the last air I wish to breathe as I go to meet my forebears." So we can see here Ellison's priorities. Before I die, I'm going to sleep with all my wives and be surrounded by their scent and touch their feet. This is the last air I wish to breathe. So showing this love of material pleasures of the body rather than of the spirit. The whole way through this extract we have got very, very poetic language, dense with metaphor, dense with meaning and dense with beauty, which, as I said in my revision lesson, other video, very much contrasts with the colonialists' use of English, which is thin and slang ridden and lacking any level of beauty whatsoever. So you can always look out for in any extract the Yoruba use of beautiful poetic language and use that as an example of Siyinka showcasing that beauty of the Yoruba language, culture and people that was almost destroyed by colonialism. So some examples of this poetic language: "Your name will be like the sweet berry a child places under his tongue to sweeten the passage of food." Ooh, passage. And Ellison: "I've become a monarch whose palace is built with tenderness and beauty." Do you ever hear the Pilkins talk this way? So it's showing that they are high status characters and that they're characters that are deeply in touch with nature and characters that have got command of their own culture, unlike the Pilkins. Within that same section, we have got this interesting use of the monarch metaphor. I become a monarch whose palace is built with tenderness and beauty. So we see that Ellison is most definitely not a humble man. He's arrogant, he's hubristic, which means if you have hubris, you have excessive pride and arrogance, which can often lead to a character's downfall, because if you think that nothing's ever going to go wrong and you're always right, that leaves you very open to not fully see the picture and therefore meet a tragic end. So I mean, think about the use of the word monarch, which means king or queen, royalty. Is this a suitable word choice for Ellison to be using, comparing himself to a king? He's not the king. He's the king's horseman. And also the king died 30 days ago. So it's a bit insensitive, especially since, like, he should be dying for the country, but now he's comparing himself to the king. I find it a bit disrespectful, personally. And it might also foreshadow later on how he will misuse his power to get Iologia to give her son's bride to him. So he's already getting a little bit above his station, and this monarch metaphor would be the perfect evidence of that. We see some foreshadowing too that there will be a disruption to the natural order when Ellison fails to commit his ritual suicide, thereby disrupting the 3 stages of life, destroying the passageway between them. So the praise singer says, "In their time the world was never tilted from its groove. It shall not be in yours. The gods have said no." So this metaphor of being tilted from its groove suggests that if Ellison didn't do what he was supposed to do, the world would be disrupted, upended, disastrous, right? Like the natural order, the position of the earth itself completely destroyed. Of course, the praise singer's saying, you wouldn't do that. And Ellison is arrogant enough to say the gods have said no. He's not even thought that it's something within his control. It's just the gods won't allow that to happen. The gods say that's not happening. But actually, that decision is in the hands of man. It's in the hands of Ellison to fulfill his individual sacrifice for his community. Therefore, foreshadowing how his failure of will prevent him from committing his duty. Also notice that Ellison here is saying gods, plural, right, rather than God. So this is showing that the Yoruba belief system is distinct from monotheistic, meaning one God, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. So showing that we are in terms of setting, in a different world with a different belief system. Not necessarily right or wrong, but certainly the Yoruba believe in it with a lot more depth than the Christians in the play seem to. Okay, and finally to wrap us up, I have got this beautiful vocabulary sheet right here, full of very useful words that could make your essay sound more academic, more formal, or just allow you to be a bit more precise in your analysis by giving you the vocabulary to express more complex ideas. So just take a second and have a look at these words and do think which of these terms could apply to this extract and everything that we've spoken about today. So I'll just leave this slide up for 10 seconds and let you guys have a think about it. So these are the words that I thought applied today. We've got Ellison's attachment to material pleasure, that Ellison is gregarious at the start of the play, the praise singer is an upholder of Yoruba values, that Ellison is complacent and hubristic, that his failure to commit his duty is an existential threat to the Yoruba people, that the praise singer represents the Yoruba worldview, and that Ellison is too drawn to earthly pleasures. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you've got any other extracts you'd like me to go over, let me know in the comments. And don't forget that you can find more like this on my website, tautly.co.uk. There's more free video lessons. If you're a teacher, there's some teaching resources on there and some courses that you can access for free as well. I also do tutoring. I do one-to-one tutoring. I do self-formed group classes where you find your little group of your friends and you come to me and say, "Hi, there's 5 of us, teachers please." And I do also do revision masterclasses, which are like 2-month bursts of like twice a week, let's study this. Right now I'm currently recruiting, is that the good word choice? But I'm recruiting for my IGCSE First Language Masterclass, which will run from the start of March until the end of April 2025. If you're watching after these dates, just go on my website. I'm sure that there will be other masterclasses coming up. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye bye.